Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is the third Vice Chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, Aly Bear. She is a lawyer and the first from her community of White Cap Dakota First Nation. Among her FSIN portfolios are education, sport and recreation, and the First Nations Women Commission. Vice Chief Bear, a real pleasure to have you here with us in studio.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
We just marked Red Dress Day, a time to honor and remember missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit. This is something that you spend a lot of time working on, and just last month you had a chance to question the Prime Minister at an event in Saskatchewan. Can you tell us a bit about what you wanted to tell him?
Well, I wanted to make it aware to him that this is a crisis and a state of emergency across Canada. You know, there was a lot of discussion around different issues, and this wasn't brought up. And according to the MMIW 2S Plus inquiry, this is actually amounts to cultural genocide. So we need to continue to discuss this ongoing genocide that's happening here in Canada.
You mentioned in that, when you were asking your question, that the women are afraid in their own communities. Can you talk about that?
Well, the colonial violence has now turned into lateral violence. And so the patriarchy, the misogyny, all of that has become deeply embedded and entrenched within society, but our communities as well. So when you have wider society looking at Indigenous women like they are unfortunately, disposable and less than, then we also have our own people starting to view Indigenous women the same way. And so we have a lot of situations that need to be addressed internally at home when it comes to domestic violence situations and protecting our women and children.
He gave what seems to really be the go-to answer for a lot of government officials now, and that's that there's always much more work to do. What did you think of his response to your question?
I think he's very good at, speaking to these types of issues, but I want to hold him to that. I want to hold him to what he said to me because he said it directly to my face, that we are going to be able to work on this together.
Yeah, we're just a few weeks away from what will be the 4th anniversary of the release of the final report. What are your thoughts so far on the level of action that we've seen in the past 4 years?
There's a complete lack of implementation of the 231 calls to justice from that inquiry. And it is seen in the statistics, it is seen in the amount of people, Indigenous peoples and women and Two-Spirited that continue to face violence and harm. Right here in Winnipeg, what's happening in the landfills with the 4 women that were found there. Like, the inquiry is coming on its 4th year anniversary, and we continue to see things getting worse.
Just last week, the House of Commons unanimously backed a motion by MP Leah Gazan, Winnipeg MP, declaring the deaths and disappearances of Indigenous women and girls a Canada-wide emergency, calling for funding for a new system to alert the public when someone goes missing. I guess first, do you think that the motion and that it passing unanimously is meaningful?
I hope so. Because sometimes we hear, promises, and then we continue to see that lack of change. But I think it is a step in the right direction, and I am very grateful for the advocacy from MP Leah. She is somebody I look up to, and we are very fortunate that she's in that house and being able to speak up for those who may not have a voice.
You've in the past, talking about the alert system, criticized the Amber Alert system process in Saskatchewan because in the end these are provincially operated systems. Do you feel that Amber Alerts are discriminatory?
Yes. There is a criteria that has to be met before Amber Alert goes out, and it seems that non-Indigenous people don't ever seem to meet that. I mean, Indigenous people don't ever seem to meet that criteria, but non-Indigenous people meet that criteria. You see a lot of Amber Alerts that go out for non-Indigenous children, or, and you don't see the same thing happening for when it comes to our children that are First Nations and Indigenous.
What would you like to see replace it, I guess, or changes made?
Well, I think that there needs to be Amber Alert, and the criteria doesn't have to be so, the threshold to meet that criteria shouldn't be so high. Because if we're thinking of a missing child, if we get that Amber Alert right away out there, then we have society, we have broader society, we have everybody worried and looking out for where that child is. The more days that go on, it just means that it's going to be harder to even find that child. And so the criteria shouldn't be so hard to meet, especially with our First Nations peoples.
Last month you attended the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in New York City, where you called on all levels of government and the international community to do more to end MMIWG 2S+. Well, why was it important to bring this to an international stage?
Because this isn't just an Indigenous issue, this is an everybody issue in society, and it's not just a Canada issue, it's actually an international issue. And we think about Turtle Island, and that's all of North America, and this is happening in the United States. This is happening in Brazil. This is happening in Australia. You know, it's something that needs to come to the forefront internationally, and it's a human rights issue is what it is. And if we continue to just overlook it, then it's going to continue to happen, and we're not protecting the future generations that are coming up. And it's very important to me, especially as a mother.
Vice Chief Aly Bear, more to talk about here. We're just going to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, Third Vice Chief Aly Bear. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Aly Bear, the Third Vice Chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan. And as we mentioned off the top of the show, Aly, you're a lawyer, the first from your First Nation. Why was law something that you wanted to pursue?
So I didn't realize I wanted to become a lawyer until I got into post-secondary. And it was actually the first book I opened up. It was called Visions of the Heart. And I just opened it to a random page, chapter 10, Patricia Montour. She was a Mohawk lawyer, advocate, professor, and she was actually friends of my childhood friend, Kate Montour. That was her mother, the late Kate Montour, and now the late Patricia Montour. They've both passed on now. And so as soon as I seen her name, I had like an epiphany moment, and I started studying her and her work, and that's when I kind of realized, like, I have to get into law. I have to become a lawyer. This is how I can help change things and help advocate and help understand who I am as well at the same time.
How significant do you think it is that you're the first from your First Nation?
I think it's huge. I was in law school recently, right? I called to the bar in 2021. I graduated in 2020. And a lot of our First Nation students were the first from their communities. And so that's just showing like this change that's happening. And we need more First Nation lawyers. We need more Indigenous lawyers. It's not easy to navigate the colonial education system. You know, there's still a lot of racism in law school. There's still a lot of barriers to becoming a lawyer as an Indigenous person. That all needs to be addressed. But I mean, we weren't allowed to even hire lawyers until 1951 due to the Indian Act, because they didn't want us to advocate for our rights. They didn't want us to know our rights. And so to see us now becoming the first of our communities is going to cause a ripple effect within our communities, is what I hope.
What were some of the barriers that you faced?
Well, I was a single mother in law school, and so, you know, right away I feel like there was not only the stereotype that you're a First Nation woman, but you're a single mom. And I think a lot of people doubted that I could do it. I've actually had people tell me to my face that I wasn't going to be able to do it. But that kind of challenge kind of made me think like, well, I'll prove you wrong. I can do this. My daughters were very young. They're now 7 and 9 years old. And so that was definitely hard to juggle, being a mother, going to law school full time. I was also on the Indigenous Law Students Association as the vice president, because I think representation matters. And, you know, and also being that bridge to the non-Indigenous students and showing them, you know, breaking those stereotypes, breaking those biases that are embedded in our communities. And then, you know, I wrote for Eagle Feather News once a month, and I had a Dakota Wean Society within my community where Dakota women gathered once a month. So I was juggling a lot. So that was very challenging, but I think work ethic is something that's been role modeled to me in my life. I grew up as my dad, with my dad being the chief of our nation. My mom is an educator. She's a principal of the school in our nation. And so that work ethic has always been, you know, role modeled to me. And one thing my dad has always told me is that we're a hardworking people, and to never forget that, and to not let those stereotypes and biases, you know, misrepresent who I am.
You've spoken about creating some sort of a fund or a scholarship for people like you in post-secondary. Can you tell us what you'd like to see there?
Well, one of my long-term dreams is to have a scholarship for single parents who are in post-secondary. It's something that is definitely no easy feat for anybody to go to post-secondary, and then even to be, you know, throw in being Indigenous, and then throw in being a single parent. So I would love to one day have my own scholarship that's for specifically single parents that are trying to be educated and, you know, show their children a different path in life and be able to provide.
Good stuff. Well, we hope you get that wish. Last summer, when you did sign the role of law at the Law Society of Saskatchewan, you made a bit of a fashion statement, I guess we could say. Could you tell us about that?
So I have seen people wear the red handprint on their face many times before, specifically, you know, to bring awareness to missing murdered Indigenous women and girls in the Two-Spirited community. I've never done that. I was not sure when or if I was going to do that, and there was just something. I was like a week before I seen the red suit in the mall, and I was like, yeah, that's the one. I tried it on, it was perfect, and then it just so happened that my kids had a bunch of paint in the house, and one red paint was right there, and I was like, okay. And so I brought the red paint in my bag, and I went to the Law Society to sign the rolls, and I went to the bathroom, and I was like, okay. And then I walked out of the bathroom, and I think, like, a lot of people at the Law Society were quite shocked. They're like they've never seen that before. And yeah, it was to spread awareness.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what did people at the Law Society think when you came out? Some gasps or?
Yeah, you know, I mean, there was some looks, but I got a message later from one of the women that worked there, and she was actually, you know, like, gave me kudos for that. She said, you know, that's creating some change within that space as well, right? Because they don't see that every day. A lot of the people that come through there to sign the rolls are predominantly non-Indigenous peoples who are suited and, you know, not wearing face paint and not bringing their feathers in.
But there were stories about it. What was the reaction from the greater public?
I think everybody was in support of that. I went to the Regina legislature, the Saskatchewan legislature afterwards, because I just felt that, you know, we're here, we've always been here, and we're growing, healing, and we're only, you know, it's only the beginning. And something I've always liked to say is that we're coming for everything that they said that we couldn't have.
I have a lot of friends, or some friends in Saskatchewan who are also lawyers, so it kind of feels like there's a bunch of Indigenous people in Saskatchewan going through law school right now, but as you said, and any lawyer we've spoken to, there needs to be more. Why would you encourage somebody to enter into the field of law when, you know, so many Indigenous people feel the justice system is such a colonial system?
So when I was in law school, that's when the Stanley trial happened. And Gerald Stanley was acquitted for murdering Colton Boushie. And at that time, a lot of the Indigenous students literally wanted to quit law school. We're like, why are we here? The justice system doesn't give our people any justice. But that was the whole purpose. That's exactly why we're here, to try to change that, to try to advocate for justice for our people who aren't seeing any justice, to understand why it is that this colonial justice system continues, you know, to harm our people, you know, and so we need to understand that, so then we can help our people navigate that, and then at the same time revitalize our own traditional systems and implement that into today.
Another glass ceiling, I guess, that you helped break is when you were elected as the third vice chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Just the third woman to ever be elected, the youngest to be elected. Well, what does that mean for you and for others out there?
Yeah, being the youngest woman to be elected is really surreal feeling. I don't know if I've processed everything yet, that I am actually a vice chief, and because things are just so busy and trying to keep up with my responsibilities and my duties as a vice chief and also a mother and just life in general, right? But I think it's so huge for our younger generation, and especially for the younger girls. I've had a lot of people reach out to me, even non-Indigenous students, who want to do reports on me, who want to write about me, who, so it's just really good to see that me being able to stand in this place shows the younger generation that they can do that too, that they can be whatever they want to be. That little girl can be a chief if she wants to be a chief. And I think that it means a lot to me, and that's kind of why I'm here, is that when I see the youth, they can see themselves in me.
As you mentioned, your father's a chief, but what made you want to, knowing that, you would be the youngest if you were elected and only the third woman, what made you want to run for vice chief of FSIN?
That's a good question. So I didn't set out, it wasn't my dream to be a chief, to be a vice chief. It was actually, I just happened to get called to the bar in 2021. And the FSIN elections were pushed back a year because of COVID. So as soon as I was admitted to the bar, elections were coming up for FSIN. And I had some people kind of, hint to me, you should run. And then I thought about it, because as a lawyer, I still felt like my hands were tied. I still felt like I couldn't speak out about certain issues that I wanted to as much as I could. And so I thought that, leadership was another avenue for me to be able to advocate on a different level than being a lawyer, being stuck in the office. And so I went for it.
I guess you're happy that you did. So many of our guests who are women that have gotten into politics have experienced racism, sexism, maybe even ageism. Are those things that you've been met with as well?
Yeah, ever since I've entered the professional realm, like even being a lawyer and now being in leadership, it's just like, as a woman, you have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously, even being educated. And, and then being my age, a lot of people kind of have that attitude of almost like, who does she think she is, telling me this and that? And, and it's not that I'm trying to tell anyone anything. It's just that this is my position, this is where I'm at. But I think a lot of people have a hard time with it because I'm younger. And at the same time, I don't think our youth are the leaders of tomorrow. I think our youth are the leaders of today. I think our youth are brilliant. I think we go to the kids for the answers. A lot of them know what they need, and we should have more of them sitting at the table. What I've noticed is that I'm the youngest person in the room half the time, and we need more younger people because we're making decisions that are affecting their lives and their futures. And where are they? Where are they in that conversation? And that type of stuff kind of stresses me out. But I think that, we're continuing to notice that change in younger leadership coming into play.
Vice Chief Bear, more to talk about. We just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Aly Bear, the third Vice Chief of the FSIN, which represents 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan. And Chief Bear, before the break, we were talking about some of the issues that women in politics face. We had Betty Nippy-Albright on the show earlier this season, who is a MLA for the NDP in Saskatchewan, who once thought of running for the leadership of the NDP, but she said, that Saskatchewan's not ready for a strong Indigenous woman to lead. Is that the sense that you get, and what is it going to take to change that attitude there?
Honestly, I think that we just need to continue to push that barrier and have more Indigenous women come into leadership, and because I think we're stronger together. And the more of us, then, we don't feel so alone, we don't feel so outnumbered. But at the same time, we need to, recognize the people that came before us and all the hard work that they did to get us to where we're at for the future generations. But, I think one of the biggest issues, just talking about women in leadership too, is like being a mother in leadership. I think there's a lot of leaders that might have stepped down, or it just due to the lack of support. When you're a mom, you are actually doing both jobs. You come home and you are cooking supper, doing bath time, doing homework, racing to sports, and there's not much acknowledgement of that as well. And I think that the cost of living has completely skyrocketed. So when we're thinking about taking care of our children, it's different today than it was a long time ago. And we're thinking of childcare, and we're thinking of all these different aspects when it comes to supporting women in leadership. We need to also be supporting their family. We need to be supporting their children, that is, because I don't think it's the same for men and women when it comes to the parenting roles. But I don't want to be biased in that, but it's just kind of what I've seen. Our women are the backbone of our families most of the time. Our grandmothers are. We see that, but yeah, at the end of the day, if we really want our communities to succeed, we have to lift up our mothers, we have to lift up our children, and we have to support them, because we once said it takes a community to raise a child. Well, then we have to live by that.
Good stuff. You're about halfway through your term here. Are there things that stick out for you so far?
Oh yeah. So a year ago, with Betty Nippy Albright, we actually went to the Saskatchewan legislature, and on May the 5th last year, she read the Declaration to Honor Indigenous Women and Girls on the floor to the Sask party, and we filled the legislature with families and leadership all wearing red face paint, holding pictures of their families, and they adopted this declaration. And that was kind of a moment. Somebody told me, you're never going to get the Saskatchewan government to adopt the declaration. Well, we did, and I thank them for that, because now we're actually in discussions about resources behind that declaration. And I'm trying to have the Red Eagle Lodge come to fruition, which is a safe place for women and children and two-spirited people within the city of Saskatoon. And then just being around the youth, sports. I'm the head of sports. I grew up playing sports my whole life. I'm a hockey player and everything. I played winter, summer games. And so, being around the kids is definitely what's most important to me. I'm the head of education. So, going to all these grads and seeing all our youth graduate and succeed gives me that hope to keep going and that things will get better.
Awesome stuff. All things that we'd hope to ask you about on the show, education, sports. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but Vice Chief Bear, appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And that is all the time we have for this week's episode of Face to Face. To catch up on past episodes, you can head over to our website, aptnnews.ca. The show and all of our past episodes are also available as podcasts. You can find those wherever you download your podcasts. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here next Tuesday as we wrap up Season 9 of Face to Face. We hope you'll join us. Have a great night.